Good evening and welcome to a new edition of Real World News TV. I'm your co-host Reggie Kearney and I got my other co-host Chara and Tappin. How you doing tonight, Chara?
I'm okay. I'm a little cold. This weather in the East Coast can't seem to make up its mind.
I don't know where
Yeah.
you were today. It was about 85 down here.
It was like 50 here in the city, but with a strong cold breeze.
Oh, it was hot down here.
And hence the turtleneck in friggin' April, right?
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
All right, tonight we're going to just keep rehashing the news as it has taken place since the last time we were on last Tuesday night. Um, mm. Where did we start at? I guess it just never ends. It just
Dive
never,
in.
yeah. Um, Seems like for the month of April, even with the conviction of Derek Chauvin, there's still been a number of police killings of blacks in cities across the country. And I found out today they're equal opportunity police officers because they kind of beat up this 80, I forget how old she was. I think she might have been in her 80s, late 70s or 80s, white lady who had dementia. And the cops were actually laughing about it after they subdued her and put handcuffs on her. So I mean, the craziness of the police department. But the biggest focus now is on the shooting of Brown down in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, and that's been a hot button issue since last week. I think it happened last Wednesday because I was in North Carolina last week, so I think it happened Wednesday, where they were trying to attempting to serve a warrant on him, on Mr. Brown, and he started to drive off. When he started to drive off, they opened fire on him. Well, they shot him 4 times in the arm, but there was a shot that was a bullet that he took directly in his head. I was listening to Ben Crump today. They called it a kill shot. So um, they were definitely out to stop him one way or the other. But the whole thing is with the law, if you can't serve a warrant on someone and they flee the scene, you just have to let them flee. I mean, unfortunately, he's been arrested a couple of times on drug charges, so they knew they would catch him again. Okay, and that's what the whole problem happened with Delonte, with the killing of Delonte. They knew where he lived at. Hey, go get him later on. But the North Carolina case is a freaking mess. Okay, it's a freaking mess. It's like to me. And this is my opinion, it's almost like it's a payback for what happened to Derek Chauvin getting convicted, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I see it, but you got to realize North Carolina has had issues with police officers since the beginning of time. Elizabeth City is a little town with less than 20,000 people. But this was the sheriff's department. This was not the police department of Elizabeth City, which is predominantly black, but this was the sheriff's department of the county. What you think, Cheryl?
I agree. The first question that always comes to my mind when there are these murders, state-sanctioned murders, was the offense that they were stopped for or trying to issue a warrant for a violent offense? And more often than not, it's not. We've seen all of the broken taillights, the wallet in hand, the phone in hand, eating Skittles with headphones on and not hearing somebody call you and tell you to stop walking from behind. And it seems like it all boils down to the minute you contest their will, it becomes a death sentence. And it's no longer about enforcing the law. It's enforcing their will at the cost of your life. Because if it were simply enforcing the law, like you said, they know where he lives, they can find him, they picked him up before. Again, I'll focus on the non-violent criminals. They had some weed on them or something, or driving without a license, or not paying child support, or whatever the warrant was for. I don't know what it was for Mr. Brown, but it just seems like they have a license to kill, and it's mind-boggling to me. Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned what happened to that poor woman with dementia. It just reaffirms the notion, and I was thinking about this before the show, what does reform mean? What shape will it take? And we've seen a number of states that have already made some changes, and on paper it looks great. We just need to see these changes being implemented and enforced. But when the police argue against reform, and I'm not going to say defunding because that was unfortunate wording, bad branding, what it meant was reallocating funds to other agencies or departments that may be better suited to handle certain cases. Case in point, this old lady with dementia was a danger to no one. And manhandling her like that was completely unnecessary. God forbid you did it to one of their mothers. They'd probably show up at your house and kill you. But if it's not their family, if it's not a member of the Blue, all bets are off. And I hope that family sues. Because in terms of dementia, depending on how far she's gone, that whole experience could set her off even further down the road of dementia, negatively affecting what little time the family had left with this woman, if she had any of her right mind left. And those are some serious damages. So I do hope that they sue. But the police often, their clapback is, oh, you want to get rid of the police? You can't live without us. You'll never be able to feel safe again. Like they feel like they are the only ones who can handle any of these calls, whether it's a social services related call or something minor. Like I saw yesterday, a man called the cops because he saw a child dancing in his neighbor's yard she was filming a TikTok, but because she was a black little girl and he didn't know her, he called the cops. And that kind of stuff needs to stop. I really, I think they, what do they call it? The woman from the park, I think her name was actually Karen, and they'd proposed legislation to make it illegal to call the police on bullshit calls like that. And I think they need to enforce that. It's absolutely ridiculous. And you're seeing police act out in light of what happened in the Chauvin case and the verdict. You're seeing racists throughout the country act out, and I'm hoping that this is, unfortunately, it'll be a slow and long, but I'm hoping that this is the mark of the death knell. Because, like when an animal is wounded, they fight even harder until they're dead or gone or incapacitated. And I'm hoping that all of this crap bubbling to the surface is representative of a death knell of this culture. I know it'll take a really long time, but I have to, like we said during the last show, I have to have some kind of hope because we can't keep going on the way we've been going on.
Well, you'll be dead for the death knell to come to an end, okay? Because it's not. I mean, this country is built on racism and it will continue on. I mean, if you look at one of the videos that they showed on TV, the police arriving at Brown's house, they riding in the back of a little pickup truck, about six or seven of them. Okay, They went there with the idea, oh, this is a big time drug dealer. We got to go there with our little small county SWAT team in the back of a pickup truck. I guess they couldn't afford the armor car that the Army has. And then they're going to show up. And then after they searched the house, they found no drugs. So I wish he hadn't tried to leave, but I guess he felt uncomfortable being there with them and stuff, but they didn't find any drugs. Then we had another killing here in this area in Spotsylvania County where the police officer shot this young man 10 times. Fortunately, he is still living. He's hanging on by a thread, but what happened, the guy's car was broke down alongside the road. So he took him home and dropped him off. And then I guess his brother got in a fuss and he called the dispatcher and said he was going to kill his brother. And the dispatcher asked him, did he have a gun? He said, no, he didn't have a gun. Where the disconnect comes when the officer got there, the officer sees him with something up to his head. He thinks it's a gun, but it's actually a cell phone. The disconnect is, did the dispatcher inform the officer that he said he didn't have a gun?
Yeah.
But he shot the young man 10 times, okay? 10 times.
Now you have to ask yourself, is it fear that causes you to shoot somebody 10 times? Is it hate? A
little bit of it all. Then mixed in with some stupidity, lack of training. There's a lot of things that go into racism. But I mean, can you say racism in this case? I mean, he did offer the young man a ride home, okay? But I think it's the lack of training is the number one issue. How to de-escalate something and not assume that everyone has a gun. Just like the young man in San Diego who got killed in his grandmother's backyard, running from the police. He had a cell phone in his hand. It's been a number of cases like that.
Well, I think it's fine and dandy that he drove him home, but I do still think that racism played a part, because you have to ask yourself, would they have been so quick to shoot, to kill,
Well,
if it had been anybody else?
they're not, even though you might want to say it's racism, we already know they're not going to shoot a white person as quickly as they shoot a black person. Someone posted a video on my Facebook page of some young white kids beating the crap out of a police car with a police officer in there because it was on dash cam.
Right, with the hockey stick.
Yeah, and daring him to get out the car.
Yeah.
He never gets out of the car. Now let's take that back and reverse it and put black young men into that picture. He would have got in the car, told him to stop, and they didn't stop. He would have shot him.
100%.
So I don't think, it's probably some of it's racism, but I think it's a lot about, I call it the slave mentality, okay? Plantation owner mentality, where they still feel like they own us, okay? And so they go off on the edge when it comes to blacks, okay? They go off on the end when it comes to black because I think deep down, they still think they're running a plantation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of that plays in there, but, when I look at defunding the police departments, I also look at getting rid of the police departments where needed. You take the Minneapolis Police Department. Last year, the statement was made that department needed to be gutted and everyone needed to be fired and they need to rehire and rebuild that department. And my opinion is the police chief of Minneapolis needs to go.
Oh, absolutely.
Because
absolutely.
You have a guy, Chauvin, which comes out now, he's had 28 complaints against him. He's been on the force 19 years. He did put the knee in the neck of a 14-year-old. Okay, I'm saying, why hasn't the police chief ever stepped in and fired this guy? Again, it's the union. Okay, it's the union. So with a police department that's as broken as Minneapolis, then I think it's time for the federal government to come in, take it apart, tear it apart, put their people in place, rehire people, train them right, and go from there. Now, if the officers want to reapply for their jobs again, good. If they don't, bye, go somewhere else, okay? But you've got to rebuild these departments. Even the sheriff's department in the county where Elizabeth City is needs to be demolished and rebuilt again, okay?
I agree, 100%. 100%.
So when you have real problems in your police department, I think it's time to step back and say, we got to rebuild this and redo it. Simple as that.
One state, I was doing some research on the states that have implemented some form of reform, and it seems like Colorado has got everybody beat so far in terms of its progression. They're referred to as ground zero for police reform. They passed last June, during the height of the protests, Senate Bill 217, which imposed new rules on law enforcement agencies and prosecutors handling police use of force cases, permanently revokes the professional certification for officers that have been found guilty in court of inappropriate force, which means that they would not be able to be a police officer anywhere else if that certification has been revoked, and stripped Colorado officers of qualified immunity and allowed them to be personally sued for $25,000. So that's definitely a step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. But I think Ithaca, New York has the best program going right now as far as police reform and clean up the department. I just caught a glimpse of it on TV the other night on MSNBC, and they were talking to the mayor of Ithaca, New York, and they have got it right in Ithaca, New York. And, they were just talking about how police department should take the program that Ithaca, New York is even using, and rebuild their departments. Redesign the departments. But like I always say, until you can get the union to step back and let the cities do what they have to do, it's not going to happen. You know, uh, Maya, who's running for mayor in New York City, she's for defunding the department and using the funds and put it in other areas to train the police officers. But she's also saying that you don't need as many officers as you think you need. Okay, I know in New York right now they got the underwear all tied up because so many people are retiring. But do you need 40,000 police? I'm just using that figure. I know y'all have about 20,000.
We have one of the largest police forces in the
Yeah.
country, I think, here in New
So
York.
do you need that? Do you need that many people, or you need a smaller number that's trained to do the job and have other people take care of the jobs that need to be taken care of, such as mental illness and social issues, and let the police officers concentrate on the criminals, and not try to be social workers, just like with the lady with the dementia. That should have been a call with the police officer when they found her. They should have called someone from mental health or social worker in to take care of her.
Yeah.
Not not think she was a threat to them.
At that age, please, she was no threat to anyone.
But that's that mentality. They have that mentality. You can be 100 years old, and look. Let me tell you something. These cops would shoot a 100-year-old person that has a gun pointed at them. Okay. Instead of trying to.
We've seen stories here in New York years ago. I think it was in the 80s. There was an older woman, fairly long in the tooth, and she was getting evicted. She wouldn't leave her apartment. And she was sitting in her lounge chair, and she had a knife. And they wound up shooting her. She was an overweight, older woman. Even lunging, she wouldn't have gotten through to anybody. But again, this training, this indoctrination to, one, fear people of color and assume that we're capable of these Herculean feats of violence, regardless of age, gender, or size, or infirmary. We've seen legless people pulled out of wheelchairs because they feared for their life. I mean, it's just disgusting. And I have to ask myself, particularly like with Derek Chauvin, what's the threshold in terms of the number of complaints of excessive force or discrimination or things of that nature? If he could still be on the force after that many complaints lodged against him, what is their benchmark? What is that? We cannot go past this point. If he was allowed to do the very same thing to other people that killed Derek Chauvin.
The thing is,
George Floyd.
Yeah, the thing is, it goes back to the union. The union contract is so ironclad. Unless you kill a person like Chauvin did, you pretty much gonna keep your job. Okay, and you probably the city probably get sued and lose some money because of the individual, but you're gonna probably keep your job. And that's why I said the back of the union has to be broken first. Okay. And I think once you break the back of the union, you can then go forward. Now, if the union is willing to come forward and play along and get involved with the reform, okay, that's good. But if they're not, you got to figure out how to crush that union contract. If they don't want to come to the table and say, look, we do have some problems. Okay.
Well, it begs the question about the motivation and the ideology of the heads of these unions. Because like you said, if there's clearly a problem and they should have as much of a vested interest in resolving that problem as we do, and they don't, because they're invested in the system as the way it is. They like qualified immunity. They like having their own Bill of Rights. They like legislation being passed that says that they can have sex with their informants, or people in the backseat of their car who are basically handcuffed and immobile. I mean, it's insane. They're no longer police; they're roving gangs.
Yeah, well, they think they're above they think they themselves are above the law. Okay, because they are the law, and it's just a power thing. I think a lot of these guys are power tripping, and that's why you come in and have all these problems. I mean, you can look at how they let themselves go. When they come into the police academy, they're weighing a certain amount of weight. They're in physical condition, and then you see them 10 years after they join the force, they're weighing about 400 pounds, huffing and puffing, and trying to be the law. Because they feel like, yeah, I'm 400 pounds, but I got a gun on my waist. And so if somebody gets out of hand, what I do, I'm going to shoot them.
Yeah.
And that's that thinking, but I think some real reform needs to happen. And if you got to take a department and shut it down and bring U.S. Marshals in or somebody else to run the department as you rebuild it the right way, that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
And I don't care how good that police chief of Minneapolis was on the stand, he needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the root problems of the problem, okay?
Well, if he had addressed the issue umpteen years ago, George Floyd would be alive right now, or certainly not dead at the hands of Derek Chauvin. But there are a number of states right now that have made attempts to redefine use of force in the police department, and imposing the use of body cameras and requiring officers to intervene when they see another officer using excessive force. New York, Maryland, and Washington have both enacted laws or proposed laws to change that. But we have two forces going on at the same time. We have, on one side, an attempt to legitimately reform the police, and whatever interpretation you have of that. And on the other side, you have those states, typically red, who are digging in to criminalize even more behavior, and behavior that has historically been protected by the Constitution, like the ability to protest or participate in a protest. And I don't understand. I don't understand how that's constitutionally allowable, and I hope that it is brought to the Supreme Court. But unfortunately, on the federal level, there's such a quagmire because of partisanship that it's been really difficult to pass any legislation like what was it that they proposed, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which a number of people are supporting and promoting. But because of Republicans and people in the right and in red states, they haven't been able to get it passed, I think, the Senate. So talks over a compromise are underway in the Senate, where Democrats would need a support of at least 10 Republicans to overcome a filibuster. It was passed in the House in March.
Well, they're going to need to keep, the Republicans want qualified immunity to stay in the bill. Okay? They don't want to take it out. And that's the problem you're going to have. So this is what we're up against right now. If Biden cannot get the Senate to pass anything by the time the year 2022 ends, okay, then it'll never get passed, okay? Because with this census that just recently came out, we might be able to hold on to the Senate, but we might not hold on to Congress, okay? And Congress might pass the diluted bills. We still might not have what we need in the Senate, and so the process is still going to be screwed up. The process is still going to be screwed up, because the Republicans, they are strong supporters of quote unquote law and order, okay? So they support the police in whatever they do. And so they're not willing to put the police out there because, like Lindsey Graham said yesterday, well, if they can't sue the city, sue the officer, they can sue the city. And that's the whole thing. That's who's paying the tab right now. The cities and the counties are paying the tab when a police officer does something wrong.
Yeah, when you say the term law and order, I have to kind of laugh at that, because how many of these red state Republicans have been promoting, a platform of law and order, the catchphrase, only later to be arrested or charged in child pornography, bringing minors across state line, was that Gates, and all of these other questionable activities. They're not for law and order. They're simply for control. And I guess the question becomes, whose order? But it's not law and order at the end of the day.
The police unions have always been red. Again, look at New York City's police department. The union. They supported the orange head 100%. Okay, and that's why they tend to hold on to them, because of the simple fact there's power in their numbers to get them reelected. And so they don't want to cross the line with anything that might offend their constituency.
But I have to go back and do some research because I think qualified immunity started in the 80s. So what did they do before that? What level of
There was
accountability?
nothing happening. It was nothing happening. I mean, did Emmett Till's mother sue the state of Mississippi? No. I mean, it wasn't happening.
Well,
Did John Lewis?
that's going
Did,
back significantly
yeah,
farther
but
than
look,
1983.
Did John Lewis in 1965 sue the state highway patrol of Alabama in Mississippi? Did they? No. I mean, it wasn't the idea of, it wasn't never thought of that you go and sue the department. And then in the 80s was so much happening. I think when the Black Panthers, you had that shootout with the Black Panthers, you had the Philadelphia bombing. Then you started seeing lawsuits popping up against the city for the police officers being off the hook. And I think that's what brought it around, because they wanted to protect, because these cities were losing money. So if you pin the murder on the correct police officer, they're gonna lose everything they got.
Look, if you get rid of qualified immunity, because it's basically a license to kill, and then if the individual is found guilty, like Chauvin was, they lose their pension, and that money goes into a pot used to help pay for these lawsuits. Revoke their certificate so they can't become police officers anywhere else in the union. But we need to start holding police accountable. I get annoyed when I think that my tax dollars are going to pay for these cases against the police when we know that they're guilty of it. In any other field, okay, you may have insurance, right? Like doctors have insurance, et cetera. It's not qualified immunity, it's insurance. And the insurance company gets to decide whether or not they're going to cover that. Even think about professional liability. If somebody sues you for discrimination, after they investigate, look at all of the facts, if the insurance company thinks that the company is at fault, they will not cover you if you lose the case. And why the police are treated any differently than any other profession, including other professions in municipalities and on the state and city level, is beyond me. It is a recipe for disaster. And as you described those police going to serve that warrant to Brown in the pickup truck, I could not help but get an image of my head of the picnic goers in their pickup trucks with their rope and their gasoline and whatnot, getting ready to go to a lynching.
Well, the thing about it, it did come up one time years ago that a police officer should have malpractice insurance, a form of malpractice insurance. But the union fought against that because they were saying that the officers shouldn't have to incur costs of carrying insurance for protection. So it's always been about protecting the police officer and feeling that the police officers were always right, in which they have been shown incorrectly that they're always right. When you look at Eric Garner, when you look at all these other, and Sarah Bland, when you look at all these cases where we know something happened, but the police officers either walk or they either don't even get charged, okay? And that's the whole problem. They've just been protected too long. And I think it's time for that protection to come down. And it's going to take a long time for it to come down, because you got 18,000 police departments around the country. And you got a lot of small town police departments in red states that just never going to conform to what's going on. And would dare a black person to get out of place so they can kill him.
Well, they had to conform to desegregation. They had to conform to us having our constitutional rights. They don't like it.
They haven't conformed to the desegregation. They have just dealt with it, okay? They had just dealt with it, okay?
Conform. It's same thing in my book. You don't have to like it.
They haven't conformed. They haven't done anything. They have just made it easier for us as Black Americans to live easier in this country, okay? Because there is always a threat of a lawsuit or things of that nature, okay? We still are considered second-class citizens, okay? You look at how they shoot a person 4 times in the arm, but then put a kill shot in the back of his head, and he's driving away. I mean, they don't give a. I mean, these cops do not give a rat's ass about blacks. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I don't care. You can stay in the most perfect community. You still got some racist cops on your force, and they might stay hidden until something happens that they do something stupid.
Mm-hmm. 100%.
You know, and it always happens.
I just don't know how we're going to weed these people out of the force.
You can't. I mean, Homeland Security is going to do. They're going to try to weed out all the racist white supremacists out of Homeland Security. And I'm saying, but I want to see this. I'm gonna get some popcorn. I'm gonna wait to see this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they can't. You can't do it. You know, you think
Well,
I'm
I mean, maybe what they'll start doing is they'll stop tattooing themselves so that they can be so easily identifiable. I mean, look,
yeah,
if they get to stop people in California and check for gang signs and take photographs of it, then we should be able to do the same thing to them.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you think if I'm a racist, I'm gonna tell them when they ask me a question and you're racist. If I got stuff on my Facebook page, don't you know I'm gonna take that Facebook page and Twitter account down?
They
You know,
haven't done it yet. So many of them
but
have been getting outed with this
Well,
nonsense.
most of them are probably going to do it now with Homeland Security. They're going to put a big effort in going through and getting
Well,
to
you
look
know,
at.
that's the beauty about the internet. Nothing ever goes away.
Yeah, but
And
you got to have
they're
proof. You got to have proof first that the person was a supremacist. So if he's not going around, nobody's going to turn on anybody. Which they're not. You're never going to attain the objective that you're looking to attain. Because I'm not going to out my friends. If I'm racist and I know this other officers are racist, you think I'm going to out them?
Look, if
I
there
mean,
are
so
ways, if Homeland Security has found ways to bend themselves into a pretzel to identify somebody of Muslim faith or from the Middle East who's got 32 degrees of separation between them and somebody who belongs to Al Qaeda or one of those groups, they can do this. And it would actually cost them less money because they're doing the search here in our own country instead of looking abroad. It is not insurmountable. It is totally doable.
I don't think
Absolutely.
it is. I don't think it is that because these guys are going to protect each other. Okay, they're just going to look out for each other. This is a problem. I mean, you even got the problem in the armed forces. Okay, you know the problem is rooted in everything that you deal with that comes to that services the United States. There are a lot of white supremacists in these organizations.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so once you get them out of the organization, what happens then? They end up tying themselves up with these militias, and the process, I'm not saying the process, but the desire is still there to do dumb stuff that affects our lives.
Well, the desire will always be there until we can come up with some cocktail that we can give people that affects them on a genetic level so that they lose this mutant sense of superiority. You know, that's our only recourse is to do the investigations and the research and start pulling out the weeds, if you will. They're going to go home. They're going to be pissed. They're going to fester in their hate. That's not going to change. But we need to get them out of these positions of authority. Because once they're a regular Joe, just like anybody else, they can be dealt with just like anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And you know, this whole thing has to be an embarrassment to the United States because here's a nation that prides itself on democracy, okay, and treating people right, and they're definitely alone the boom on black Americans. And then in the Guardian newspaper today, it said they did an article, and the title article was "Police Killings of Black Americans Amount to Crimes Against Humanity,
saw that.
International Crime Fines." Okay, and they're asking the International Criminal Court prosecutor to investigate the United States and how they handle their cases that are affecting blacks. Okay, because it is affecting us. Okay, it is affecting us. The treatment that we receive. You know, because as a black man driving while black just ain't getting it because you don't know if you're gonna get back home safe.
Whether you comply or not.
That's right. That's right. You know. So do you comply Or do you just keep driving till you get home and get in your driveway, and then you get a pissed off white cop who asks you why you didn't stop when I stopped you 2 miles up the road? You say, well, you want to get home so you can feel safe. And then all of a sudden he decides he wants to kill you because you want to be at home feeling safe.
You know, they used to tell women who were driving alone, if somebody in a unmarked car is trying to flag you down, potentially a police officer, and you don't feel safe, call 911 and drive to the nearest police department.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't even think that we have that choice.
You won't get far, especially going towards the police department.
And depending on what municipality you're in, they may call ahead and have people waiting for you.
So how can we push human rights around the world when we can't even deal with human rights in our own country?
Well, first you have to acknowledge we're human.
Well, they ain't gonna do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're not gonna do that.
It's exhausting.
Yes,
it's absolutely
it is
exhausting. But we can't stop fighting. We can't give up the fight. And we have to ride this wave that we've had, this groundswell of activity over the last year. You know, and as horrific and unnecessary as the murder of George Floyd was, it was a catalyst for people across the country and across the globe to take notice. And I've seen more activism on the ground level than I have in years. And I just hope it amounts to something.
You've got to realize this was just one case, okay? There are going to be many more cases. And there are going to be cases that probably people not going to be convicted, okay? The one thing that Ellis did that was good in the way he did this case, he never talked about race. He never brought race into the equation, okay?
Well, it was a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, but it's still, he didn't bring it up as part of the process in getting Chauvin convicted. He focused on what Chauvin had did. Not did he do it to a black man or a white man, or was he racist or anything like that. He focused on the excessive force that was used on a human being. Okay, it could have been a white person. He would have done the same thing. You know, so you know that I think if he had went the other way, harping on race, this, race, that, you know, that Chauvin killed him because he was a black man, I don't think he would have got the sympathy of the jury. But when he put Floyd in the light of being a human being, a helpless human being that was handcuffed, okay, he was killed, you know, just because, not because of his race, not because of anything, but just because you got a jerk with a knee on his neck, then making him seem like a human, regardless of all his negative things that happened in his life. He showed him to be a human, and that's where the jury fell in, okay? And they say, you know, Chauvin killed this guy. Then the next case that comes up might not be as easy to prosecute, you know.
Yeah, no, it was a really good strategic decision on his part because, while I do think very strongly, and I don't know that anybody doubts this, that race played a part in it, just staying on the cold, hard facts that were before us, it disabled the defense from being able to spin the narrative and make this case solely about race as opposed to the excessive use of force which led to the death of this man. And that's what they often do to gaslight us. We may say something that's 100% accurate and true and on point, but they don't want to hear it because, you know, as far as they're concerned, racism doesn't exist in this country. Just like McConnell said recently in an interview, he practically choked on the words that the Derek Chauvin verdict was justified and just. But then he went on to say that there is no such thing as systemic racism in this country, and that it's the same old the few bad apples argument.
And it really pisses me off that whites feel that way. Okay,
Mhm.
not all whites, but a great number of them feel like racism, like Graham said, disappeared with Obama being elected and with Harris being elected. Oh, it's no racism. Why would we elect a black vice
Yeah,
president? Why
but
would we
you
elect a
didn't.
black
You
president?
didn't. The racists didn't elect him. You know, that's like the most poignant point there. They didn't elect him, so he can't use the royal we there.
But that's what they do, and they're so stuck on that. They would have felt they felt like that the worst thing that happened to Chauvin was him being found guilty. He's a police officer. Okay, he's there to protect and serve. He did what he had to do. You got a black man trying to tear the car up with handcuffs on. He had to subdue him. He did the right thing. That's what these, I can't use no other names, but that's what they see, okay?
So which was it? He was so drugged up that it led to his death, because if he was that drugged up, he would have been physically incapable of fighting back or tearing up the inside of the car, let alone the fact that his hands were cuffed behind his back, just like
Mm-hmm.
that kid that supposedly committed suicide with a police gun while his hands were handcuffed behind his back a couple of years
Mm-hmm.
ago. I mean, it just defies reality. It just, and common sense and ethics and morals and humanity to accept that there are people who are willing to buy these
Mm-hmm.
bullshit spins.
Well,
Clearly, somebody whose hands are tied behind their back can't shoot themselves in the head. Clearly, somebody whose hands are tied behind their back can't hang themselves and beat
yeah.
themselves up before they hung themselves.
Yes, they can. Yes, they can. The white police department has said that they can. Then Teresa Edgerton Thompson said, the police have never conformed and never will. They will forever continue to pretend that they are doing the black race a favor and shoot at the same time. They think that they are superior with that weapon on their hip. Not saying all cops, but like you just stated, a pissed off white cop who just spotted a prime target. A person of color, Lord help us safe. Lord keep us safe. Okay? So that's how they doing it. That's how they rolling. Okay,
Yeah.
so this thing is going to continue on and on. Who would have thought that in the month of April, you would have had, I think it's at least 4 police shootings of blacks, two or three, two since uh, the conviction of Chauvin. You would think, duh, something's wrong. I got to be careful out here. They don't care.
No, and it's the same states. It's always the same states. But you made a comment, and I don't remember what it was, but it made me think of a cousin of mine, a cousin-in-law. And he's a police officer. I think he might even be a chief out in a quiet state. And I don't believe that he has much crime in the municipality that he works in. But when I last saw him, something he said got me on a tear about police brutality on the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And he was oblivious to the abuses that have been demonstrated on film, that have been proven in court, yada, yada. And his nice guy, I like him a lot, big teddy bear. But on the face of it, his initial reaction was to doubt it because he's reading, he's out on the West Coast, but in a red state where they're likely to spin doctor the news.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to show him, like, I was like, this case, this case, this case. And he thought that I was, exaggerating. So I had to show him videos. And I said, you have to agree this is unacceptable, that this is beyond the pale. And he was actually shocked to see it. So even in this modern age of technology where we have Facebook, which I don't think he's on very often, and all the social media platforms, and I imagine that in some states, all these folks get are their red news and the spin, and they have no true sense of what's
Yeah.
going on in the rest of the country.
And that's how Fox does it. And that's how Sinclair News does it. I mean, Sinclair News here in DC, they don't they don't step out of bounds because of the area they're in. Okay, but I'm pretty sure where they have stations in smaller communities and red states and things like that, it's a different spin on the news. But Fox News they they just straight up lie about the news. Okay, it's just like the thing with you know they're going around saying now that Biden is going to limit you to one hamburger beef patty a month. Okay, and the
Sounds
whole
more like
thing got
Trump.
the whole thing got started because of some effect with global warming and things of that nature, and the climate being all jacked up. You might have less beef being produced by animals because of climate change. Okay, so they took that whole scenario and spin it in a way where, hey, they want your guns, and then they come after your hamburgers and your steaks. And people
Look,
actually believe. I was in the gym yesterday morning, and I looked up at Fox to crawl, and they were actually pushing that whole thing that Biden was coming after your hamburgers.
absolutely. I mean, that what just earlier today or yesterday, even Tucker Carlson was, I think it was him. I know all those idiots are that look the same to me, but he was actually telling people to call Child Protective Services or the police if you see a child wearing a mask because of COVID, because that amounts to child abuse. And I actually had to do a double take to make sure that this wasn't satire. So you have these news sites, and on the one hand, Fox News and those right-wing places called the left-wing media, whether it's CNN, New York Times, or anybody else who doesn't suckle at the teat of the neo-right, leftists promoting, racism, which they're reporting it. They're not promoting it. There's a difference. But here you have news outlets that are technically really entertainment outlets pushing these narratives and these stories in an attempt to maintain the polarization or increase it in this country. Now, I believe in free speech, but how that isn't tantamount to yelling fire in a crowded theater, especially after the year that we've had, is beyond me. And even though we know that they're registered as entertainment, even though we know that they argued themselves in court, no one would take what we say seriously. They're still treated as news and a news source. Newsmax, Breitbart, OAN, whatever they're called, Fox, they're all the same toxic bullshit that are tearing this country apart at the seams while projecting their crimes against humanity onto other news outlets. It's just, we live in a really bizarre time. Now, let me ask you something. In the 60s and 50s, was the media as bad?
No, because you had Walter Cronkite, and they gave the news just like it was. They didn't put a spin to it. News in the 60s, and from what I remember looking at the news was the news. Billy Bob fell off his bike today and scraped his knee, and that was it. They didn't add nothing to what Billy Bob did or take away. They told the news as it was. Okay, I mean, you got to look at the Vietnam War. They could have put a spin. They could have put a spin on the Vietnam War because a lot of men got killed in the Vietnam War. They could have really limited what news we got out of Vietnam when it came to the Vietnam War, but they never did. They told it just like it was. It was a horror story, but they told it like it was. I think with Newt Gingrich and his contract with America, I think during that time is when things started going bad, going south for news. Okay, whether it's your liberal news or your right-wing news. I think what happened, all the news agencies got away from being exact with the news to putting a spin on the news. Okay.
So in '85, I forget the name of that guy who started Fox. Murdoch, right? Demon spawned from hell. To me, he's as bad as Epstein, but for different reasons. But let me ask you, the bombing of the apartment complex in '85, what was it, in Philadelphia, when they were chasing the Black Panthers guy?
Right.
Yeah. How did they report that?
Let me tell you something. At one time I watched Fox. Okay. All right. Because back in the day, news was news. Okay. It wasn't a spin to it. You couldn't put a spin on what happened in Philadelphia. Okay. That's why the families they got some money, okay? Because the way Philadelphia, with a black mayor at that time, handled that situation was off the scales. He didn't have to go in and drop bombs on that. Because what happened was the bombs set the places on fire, okay? So there was a time when news was news, okay? But it came up a time, they even with Breitbart, they said when the old man was living, Breitbart was something you could consider as a news source. But when he passed away and other people stepped in, they started manipulating the news. And that's basically what has happened with Fox. They have manipulated the news to benefit them. Okay. It's just like with the beef. You know, it was not about limiting people to one beef patty a month. It was about climate change and how climate change can even affect, it's going to affect us as humans on how we react to things. It's going to affect.
But remember, this is the same group that they're science deniers. They don't believe in climate change.
Yeah.
And I knew the moment there was an article about manufacturing beef in a lab, that we were headed into some dire straits eventually, you know, with everything that we're doing with the climate and the environment, that it's just a matter of time before we're all just 1 degree shy of Soylent Green. But but they won't report on the climate change aspect of it. They're not going to report on the why.
They won't report on the climate change the correct way, what's really happening, okay? What you're hearing from liberal media about climate change is the truth, okay? I mean, it's like even on the Maryland Eastern Shore, there are areas in the Maryland Eastern Shore that are going under because of the rising of the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, okay? It's already happening, okay? They said that the home area where Harriet Tubman lived and where her house was, in 50 years, that would be underwater. No, I think it was 10 years it would be underwater. I said, I'll still be living and I'll see that. I get to see that because it's already going underwater now. You know, so they spin the news. It's no climate change. Nothing's going to happen. It's just like in about 100 years, unless they do something, Lower Manhattan would be part of the Hudson River. Okay, it's just that's what's going to happen. I don't care how tall you build a building, you're gonna walk out and you're gonna have to take a boat home. Okay, you know it's going to happen. Climate, unless we get a control on climate change and maybe push it another 200 or 300 years down the road. Like Tony said, and I had forgot about this, is about SAL, the Seminese Liberated Army. They made them out to be boogie bears. Okay. They weren't. They were just fighting for the rights of people here in America. They were just like the Black Panther Party. That's all they were doing. But they took it and spent it that made them look like they were enemies of the state, and they weren't.
Enemies of the state of whiteness, maybe.
Yeah, but they had an agenda that maybe could have changed America. It's just like with Angela Davis. She was a radical. Okay, she was. And what she was trying to do, they were trying to show how the United States was doing things to harm us and harm other people. Okay, yes, did some violence take place? Yes. Did they try to make her out to be the boogeyman? Yes. But they could never really get her where they wanted to get her. Yes, she served a little time. She came out. She's a great professor, a great writer, a great oratorical person. But they couldn't do what they wanted to do to shut her up, okay? Again, spinning the news. And like I said, I really think when the Republicans really started getting a hold of this country, that's when the news started being spun, when Newt Gingrich and the boys did the contract with America. I think that's really when they started spinning it, and it never stopped.
Yeah, okay. No, we've practically gone full on 1984 at this point with respect to the news and what is it? Thought crimes and doublespeak and, the reimagining of the meanings of words. It's been a really surreal period of time. I would say certainly the last 4 years, but the last 10 years, in particular after Obama was elected, we saw that instant backlash and, the waters started to boil and all the crazies were crawling out from under their rocks, and they haven't crawled back under yet.
Yeah. So with the spin going on, this is what you've had the police departments do. They've tried to spin everything to that benefit. Okay, Eric Garner, he caused his own death. Okay, he wouldn't just come with us for selling cigarettes. Okay, so we had to subdue him. He was getting rough. So we had to use excessive force. They started making their own scenarios that was sticking. It just happened this time that you got a smart black man who was attorney general for the state of Minnesota that took a whole different approach to the case and stayed away from color, but stayed on the facts. Okay, didn't spin it about color, didn't spin it about nothing else. He spin it that George Floyd was a human being, and this is what the officer did to him.
I think that if it is found that a police officer is, I mean, obviously we have perjury laws, and they rarely seem to get called out on it. Medical examiner office does a half-assed examination to spin the narrative that this person was, killed under these circumstances, which may or may not be legitimate. Then another medical examiner does a thorough exam and finds broken neck bones or whatever. There was another case recently, and I can't recall what state it was in, but they had shot a man who was on the ground. Now, the attorney was asking the officer who was on the stand, did you direct this man to get on the floor and crawl towards you? Yes. But then he turns around and says that he told his police officer buddy he's crawling toward us to get a more strategic position so he can shoot us, and then they shot him. So he caught himself on the stand stuck between two opposing statements. On the one hand, he's following your direction, he's complying, he's crawling toward you as you directed, but then you use that as an opportunity to claim that he was trying to get an advantageous point so that he could harm you in some way.
Excuse me. And look, and something else you got to know about George Floyd's case. He never, and this was a good thing, he did not call those other officers up as witnesses and ask them why they didn't do this and do that on that particular day. Okay? He dealt with the people that needed to be involved, the medical examiners, the expert witnesses, people who were there on the scene. Okay? Because if he had brought those other officers up, they might not have broken that blue wall down.
Did the defense call them up? I don't recall.
No, the defense didn't call them up.
There's a reason. Because they would have had to perjure themselves if they did. And we'll see what happens when they have their own trials. Yeah,
and the lawyers probably, their defense lawyers probably wouldn't allow them to do it anyway. But he did a great job. So that's why I say, the police departments are putting a spin on the story. Okay, they did put a spin on the story because they said black male died of
medical complications or something.
Yeah, health complications, okay? Thank God for that young lady who should have got an Oscar for a short film. Okay? Because it hadn't been for her video of recording everything that happened and then posting it on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram, we would have never known about George Floyd.
And in some states, we never will because they have tried to make it illegal to film the police.
Yeah.
Which is also ridiculous.
Yeah.
If you are 15 feet away, you're not impacting their investigation. You are not a threat. If you're on your balcony or your porch filming, you are not a threat. And if you're doing something legal, you should have no problem with them filming. But you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And if they're stopping you from filming, it begs the question, are their cameras even on?
Yeah.
And that they thought they would get away with this, that Chauvin thought he would get away with this, even with his camera on. That any of these police officers think that their spin doctoring will suspend our ability to see the reality right in front of us is just, it's mind-boggling. But there's, I used to joke and say that the genetic pool has been spliced too thin because it just seems like we're devolving and we're getting dumber and dumber. And it seems like that's the way they want things, because we cannot question authority. We can't question the excuses that they give us. It's a very bizarre place that we live in right now in this country.
And look, I love my forefathers and I love the elders of the past. But one of the reasons we're in the situation that we're in, because they always told us, if you get stopped by a police officer, yes sir, yes ma'am, do whatever they ask you to do. Don't question them or do anything like that. And that's why they continue to feel like they have the power, because if we overdo the respect issue of okay? And that's
Before this hour went incredibly quick, I'm just going to say. But before we end, I just want to mention some of the detail in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which is being considered on the federal level. It would create a national police misconduct registry, require all federal, state, local law enforcement to submit reports about complaints and discipline, and would also ban the use of chokeholds, no-knock warrants in drug cases. But those bans can only apply, unfortunately, to federal officers, so they'll have to do that on the lower level as well. But if we can get that passed, and if we can get other states to do the same thing that New York, Maryland, DC, and Colorado have done, we'll be in a significantly better place.
Well, you got to realize that's a Democratic points of the George Floyd bill. The Tim Scott version is going to be way different than that.
Watered down or stronger.
And that's probably going to be the one that's going to end up getting passed, the watered down version of it, okay? If it passes. But a commentator said last week it might be years before that bill gets passed. You got to have the right combination of senators to get that bill passed. And the group you have now is not going to pass it.
I wonder if all Black people in America could take vacation at the same time. Take your 2 weeks, which you're entitled to by law. Stop working for 2 weeks. Shut things down. Shut the country down. If they'd hear us then.
No. But they know we got to come back to work. We got bills to pay.
Yeah, this is true. Oh, we can all file for FMLA because we have PTSD from all the shit that we've gone through.
And that might be good. I know I got PTSD. Yeah. You can get it just listening to what's going on and having to live with this every day and deal with it, Because, like I said, for me, I have to worry about my son, okay? I have to worry about myself. Then I have to worry about my son. I got a nephew that's a young guy. I have to worry about my brother. So the thing about it, we're killing ourselves just worrying about, what's going on.
Yeah, you talk about hypertension and heart attacks and all of that stuff. Yeah. It's no small wonder. Not to mention
like you're sitting around waiting for the next. You're sitting around waiting for the next bullet to hit a black man.
Well, hopefully next week we'll have something more optimistic to talk about.
I doubt it.
Tony, you want to chime in? The perfect mate.
I think she's going to be the perfect mate.
Good show. I enjoyed it. It did go fast.
It went really fast. I don't know if you saw my eyes. I looked at the clock and I was like, what?
Tony, bringing up those that history tells our age, okay?
When I was writing it and when I hit send,
did I do that?
Dang it. Now they're going to know that I'm not 30.
Yep. Oh, boy.
But those were times, and in a lot of ways you can relate to those groups, the Simeonese Liberated Army, the Black Panthers. You can relate that to what's going on now with Black Lives Matter. You've got all of these other Black organizations that are trying to do good for the people, right? And at every turn, you're going to find that networks like Fox News is going to spin it to make it seem that we are terrorists, So it's not that, and let's look at it this way. So the Black Panther Party was a group that was, I'm going to say nationwide because they had chapters all over the U.S., right? The Symbionese Liberated Army was only based in Los Angeles and in Oakland. They weren't as large. They did not have the following that most people did. The only reason why they were classified as a terrorist group is because of little Patty Hearst, who was a white woman, right? The daughter of one of the most successful billionaires, at that time. right?
Hearst
So,
media.
right. But then if you look at it, and this is for people who don't know that era, if you go back and you look up that group and you look at all of the things that happened when it came to Patty Hearst, you have to take a real close look at the fact that how in the hell did she get kidnapped when she had friends who were part of this group? And all of a sudden now she's kidnapped. But she was a stoner. She was a true stoner. And these people did drugs just like everybody else. You know, back then it was free love, free drugs, right? But as soon as they showed that she was making a video and they said she was forced to read the words and read a script that she had been kidnapped, that is when this group became, you know, number 2 enemy of the world. They became a terrorist group. Yeah. So a lot of people don't, when we look at our Black history and we look at the groups and we try and personify, you know, everything about these groups, you have to take a really, really good look and see how they compare to what we're going through today. Even if we go back, I think you mentioned 1984. Mm-hmm. 1984 was when they had the white supremacist group that actually splintered over the years, but it was called the Order. And that's all it was called. Mm-hmm. But over time it is splintered. But you don't hear about them being a terrorist group. And they were the worst. Yeah. They were the worst. You will never be able to go back and look at anything on Fox News that they refer to the Order. You won't.
But the only group that considered was the Southern Law Poverty Center.
Right.
And
right.
They consider them to be a terrorist group.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a lot of history, and it all leads where we are right now. And you can do some sharp comparisons and see, just looking back at history, looking at the past, as to where we're going to end up, where we're going from this particular point, because we were fighting the same causes. They were just different degrees. Yeah. You mentioned the Vietnam War. You know, we were fighting against the war because of the number of people were killed, but also you had to look at how many Blacks were killed.
And how were they used?
Exactly.
On the front lines.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So everything is comparable. It's greatly comparable. And I think that that's where we get stuck. Everybody thinks that this is a new movement. It's not a new movement. It's a splinter, and it's a branching of what we've been through over 400 years. I mean, this goes back to, you know, Christopher Atticus. It goes back to Benjamin Banneker, you know, where he was forced to put the design together for our U.S. Capitol and Washington, D.C. It just splinters. It just keeps splintering. But we keep thinking this is new. It's not new. Mm-hmm. We just have to be smarter in how we get involved with these groups. You know, that's all we can do. They were doing it back then. We can still do it now. We just have to be smarter.
Speaking of which, a while back, you had talked about joining a citizens committee review board or something. Did you get on? What happened with that?
It went to a white woman.
Mm-hmm. They saw one of these shows. That's what it was.
I don't care. I'm still making my voice heard, so I don't care. But no, it went to a white woman. And was I upset at first? Yeah, you know, but then I thought about it. How else was I thought it was going to go? You know,
Is she an ally? Do you know anything about her?
No, I don't. And it's really not any information that I found on it. That's what's weird. You know, because when you look up me, you see everything.
Do they have, what was I going to ask? Oh, I can't remember. It's gone now. It's gone now.
Oh my God. But good show. I enjoyed it. I really, truly enjoyed it.
What's this perfect mate business going on?
So tomorrow night on Hot Topics Talk Radio, we are actually going to be kind of revisiting last week. because we went off the rails last week, right?
As you are wont to do.
That's what we do. But we ended up having Chris Smith join us on the show last week, which was fun. Also, we had one of the viewers join us, and they were talking about, what is acceptable in their mate, what they're looking for. So Yvonne and I took some time to go back on 10 years worth of shows.
Wow.
And yeah, we took the time that night and went back on 10 years of the show, and we found this one. And we spoke about the perfect mate, what people would think the perfect mate is, but we're kind of spinning it a little differently, because now we're going to put the guys in the hot seat, because I've invited them back for tomorrow night to address the perfect mate, because they were talking about, if a woman, oh God, it was so much. If a woman she has to be kind, she has to be all of these things, right? So that would be the perfect mate for this person. But what if she's a pure bitch, but she's still kind to you?
I'm gonna butcher this, right? Because I don't speak French or Creole, but I knew somebody and they said something like "chaque pain est fromageux." I can't remember, but basically translated to, for every piece of bread, there's a piece of cheese.
There's a piece of, yes.
So she may be a colossal bitch, but for somebody out there, that's perfection.
Exactly.
I mean, look, somebody married Kellyanne Conway. Somebody married Ivanka, so somebody married Trump. Somebody married.
Oh, God. Don't do that.
So many putzes out there, yeah.
All right. Oh, yeah, Jacqueline. Jacqueline will be there. So she knows how last week it just went haywire. But that's what we're doing tomorrow night on Hot Topics Talk Radio, The Perfect Mate, with me and Yvonne Baker. The show starts at 7 o'clock p.m. Pacific, 9 Central, 10 o'clock on the East Coast. And again, we will be joined by Chris Smith, our past host. And also, I can't remember. I got all this stuff written down somewhere else. But we're going to be having guests on the show tomorrow night. So I'm hoping that everybody will join us. But for information on Real World News TV, come on back to Facebook. You got to get on Facebook and you got to pull up Real World News TV. Every Tuesday night, the show starts at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, 7:30 Central, and 8:30 on the East Coast with Mr. Reggie Kearney and Ms. Chara Tappin, bringing you the hottest topics in today's news. I'm glad the way that you guys put it out there. I mean, that's perfection.
Put which out there?
I mean, you guys, the way you deliver the show and how you take your facts and your commentary and you make it as one is perfection. To me, it's perfection. I can't say it any other way. All right. So I'm inviting you guys to come on back to Real World News TV here on Facebook next week on Tuesday with Reggie Kearney and Chara and Tappin. Make sure that you follow them so you can get updates and information on the show every week. Make sure to visit our website at hottopicstalkradio.com. I'm done.
Woosah.
Good night.
Now you can NGAS.
Huh?
You can go not give a shit now.
Yeah, I'm going to take my don't give a shit pill. Because I really do feel better. I really do. I really do. I do feel better. And I thank everybody for their thoughts and their prayers because I was really, really in bad shape. So thank you. Thanks, everybody. And Reggie, I don't know. I don't think I can do it. We'll talk.
Okay. Bye. Good night, ladies.
Good night, everybody. I'm trying to get this banner up. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.